Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Moxtober Daily Recaps. I'm Caillou, joined by Ancestral and our new guest, iemcd, Ian. For those of you who don't know what Moxtober is, it's an annual event where for each day of the month of October there's a different one-word prompt, and based on that prompt, people make various creative endeavors related to the game of Magic the Gathering. Most people make custom magic cards, which is what we review in these recaps, but people also draw art, write articles, make deck lists, anything creative related to the hobby. As always, if you want to find designer credits for any and all of the cards we talk about today, as well as the full files we pull those cards from, and instructions on how you can submit your own cards to potentially be in those files so you can be featured on a future episode of the recap, all of that is in the description. But yeah, with that, I'm going to get us into our first card of the day, which is going to be from the MSC file. It's going to be Hero Fanatic. And I chose this because I feel like Cult definitely invites lots of uh, color, like white black color designs, and there's typically like a sort of like welcoming the faithful type of thing. I liked Hero Fanatic because I think it took a different spin on the trope, where it's kind of like a cult of personality, and so it whenever a legendary creature you control becomes a target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, you may pay white and tap Hero Fanatic. If you do, Hero Fanatic becomes the target of that spell or ability instead. Um, so it's essentially like sort of like a flag bearer type effect combined with we have a lot of like those one mana like Dauntless Bodyguard type stuff where it's like a cheap one mana creature that you can later trade in for protection slash value. And I like the knob here of having to pay white. It feels like a reasonable drawback slash like balancing point. So there's a shields down moment. Um, and yeah, just overall, just feels like a fun, if somewhat, I guess, like grim take on Cult of Personality. So shout out to Jayhew for this design.
Yeah, I thought that was just a really clean design. That was also my first pick. So um,
Wow.
I
Okay. The
like
the,
the
the,
way
the
it's
classic first card. We're already getting the classic host thing of overlapping lists. So that's how you know that you're really fitting in with the show culture.
I figure it's always good to start on a nominally lighthearted note. I mean, as you said, it gets a bit grim if you think about it too hard, but it really stood out for its
Yeah,
different take.
the flavor shines, right? I mean, it's a cult follower, right? This is people have like cult followings. It's not necessarily a sinister thing. It's just people are really excited. It's like watching your favorite YouTube streamer or something like that. In this case, your favorite legendary creature. Uh, I I feel like this is really kind of narrow for an effect. Maybe like in a limited set where legendary matters. If there was like a return to Dominaria and there's lots of legendary creatures, maybe this would be acceptable. But um, I feel like I don't know. I feel like I want to make this like a 1-2 or something. Push it a little bit because it it early game. If I play this on turn 1 or turn 2, I might be incentivized just to attack with it, like do something. I'm not going to have any legendary creatures out at that point, most likely, and it probably won't have the mana for it either. And if it's already tapped, then I can't really tap it. Um, and I don't know if it probably isn't going to matter if you target a legendary creature, you're probably not dealing 1 damage, but certainly if it was like a even if it was like a 2 mana 1/3 or something like that, I feel like I might be a little bit more satisfied. I don't know.
I feel like I'd want it to die on the first thing, but I could definitely see this being like a 1-2 vigilance, so you can still tap it after attacking, and it makes the
Sure.
floor of this a lot better. Yeah.
I think Vigilance would be uh, a smart addition.
Okay. Now that I've cruelly stolen your first card, what is your replacement going to be, Ian?
I wanted to talk about Chosen Sacrifice by GiantEnemy in the mtg.design file. Let me see if I pull this up myself. We're gonna have a lot of sacrifices today. I
what
think.
is that? What is the name of the card again?
Chosen sacrifice.
Got you.
Um, there's a lot of sacrifice designs today, and this one comes at it from the other end. There's and it gives you. There was a card like this in uh the Eldrazi Innistrad with the merge, and it always bothered me that it was very narrow. But I like that this is a little bit different. This is, the village sacrifice to ensure a good harvest. It gives you land. It gives you a little more life. Um, I I honestly could see it being not black. But I just I appreciate this flavorfully, and I thought it was nice to see the other side of the sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say it reminds me of Steve, Sakura Tribe Elder, which was probably a bit pushed for being a common. I think that's probably what you're referring.
No,
No, maybe not.
Foul Emissary. Oh, I just shocked myself by thinking that. I'll see if I'm right, but
There's also like Viridian
there's
Emissary, I think, where it's like 2/1 when this dies, you search up a land.
so Foul Emissary. I forget the effect, but it was something like when it's sacrificed to pay an emerge cost.
Yeah, I see what that is. Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that. And so it's very much. This is a creature that's saying, "Use me to summon a demon," or similar. And when you do, I'll give you this extra benefit.
Or just
Yeah, I
like
was just gonna say.
when the cult throws them away for its own end, it's like, cool, at least I got you a forest. I cultivated some of the land.
Exactly. It's the village sacrifice. We send our youngest into the forest every year, and one never returns, and that's how we know we're gonna have a good harvest.
Yeah,
Um,
in Adventures in Forgotten Realms, we had even just like Neverwinter Dryad. I kind of, I think this is serviceable. It's not very strong. Like I think you could probably
mhm.
make it a 2/1 and it would still be fine. Just because the 2 mana being an uncommon, the 2 life isn't something to scoff at. Like again, in the right environment, that might actually mean something. Um, just the fact that I think it's totally fine. Like in this case, right, you would have some other cards that would probably some of the other cards we're going to talk about tonight that would you would want to sacrifice this with. So yeah, I think it's totally fine. It's not powerful.
Yeah, given that
Yeah,
like we have Viridian Emissary and stuff, I almost wonder if this could be like 1G. Like maybe pushing it a bit too far, but I think that like having to sacrifice it makes it a real cost or a real like A plus B synergy needed. So
yeah, definitely. But
yeah, I think with that we can move on to our next card, which is going to be your first card of the day, Ancestral. So what's it going to be?
Okay, let's talk about Syrian Beckoner. This is in MSC. And it is a 1 and a white for a human cleric. All activated abilities of permanents your opponent's control cost an additional tap to activate, and it's a 2/2. So, um, and I believe there's like 2 of these. One has the artist credit in there. So, um, I think it's interesting that a lot of times we have activated abilities on cards that um might only cost a couple mana that you could potentially activate multiple times in a turn. So this is a way to kind of slow down your opponents. And I don't know if we've actually seen this kind of effect. It obviously a little bit narrow. This would be like a sideboard kind of thing to maybe slow down certain kinds of um, powerful creatures or enchantments. But boy, that's weird. Making an enchantment, giving an enchantment the ability to have to tap, or for that matter, a planeswalker.
Oh yeah.
I guess it doesn't really matter a whole lot on the planeswalker, but I guess it could if it was like a Gideon sort of card. And I mean, I'm sure you could change the wording here to exclude that, but it's certainly powerful. I'm not still trying to process if it's how what kind of effect it would have on most games.
Yeah, this is a really fun hate bear. Like, my main thing is like I don't know. I'm not enough of a rules person, but I'm not sure if that reminder text is the truth. I'm going to assume that the designer, Astrid with the B, probably cross-referenced with the rules, and if that is the truth, then this is a really sick card. Um, because yeah, it tackles giving an additional cost in a really interesting way where it asymmetrically can affect certain things. Um, and yeah, like it requires like being in a sideboard setting for it to really work. Um, I wonder if this could even have like you said a little bit more beef because like of the narrow range that it hits. So maybe it's like activate abilities of permanents your opponent's control cost an additional tap to activate. Whenever a non-land permanent your opponent controls becomes tapped outside of combat, exert it, something like that. Um, because I remember there was also like a thing, or maybe not exert, like, or maybe like exert it and like abilities your opponent can't activate abilities of permanence as they're tapped or while they're tapped or something. There is an interesting design that I saw on the subreddit, which was like it was like a hate bear where planeswalkers your opponent's control enter the battlefield tapped. Your opponent can't activate abilities of tapped permanents or something like that. So I think that like I'm trying to think of if there's a way to like marry those two so that it can be useful against a larger range of stuff. It's kind of like where my brainstorming stream of consciousness is going with this one.
Yeah, I'd be inclined just to throw like lifelink or make it a 2/3 or something if it's an uncommon, but just to give it something else. But I don't know. I think this could really lock down a lot of decks that rely on specific key pieces. I imagine that much like we had, that one. There was a card from Ikoria that it said you can only cast cards from your hand. Where that would just lock down entire
Yeah, Dranith
entire players and
Magistrate.
commander. This could lock down specific. It could potentially affect certain commanders in a commander game.
Yeah, I'm gonna be real. I feel like Dranith Magistrate was not made with Commander in mind, or like was not. They kind of just like did. They were like, oh yeah, ha. I don't know if there's like I don't know if there's any lore on that, on design lore on that. But that definitely feels like a design where it's like it does a lot of cool stuff in other formats, but it shuts off a lot in Commander.
Hmm. Sorry, I was thinking I would love to see the standard that required them to print this to fix it.
Ooh, like this Searing Beckoner
Like
standard.
what I would love to know if this were ever printed, I would love to know what card they intended it to be an answer to.
Probably a dragon. Probably some cheap dragon with crazy fire breathing.
Probably, yeah, like some kind of Gatling gun effect.
Hmm.
But I feel like when you see a hate bear, it kind of tells you something at the very least about the designer. Uh, what annoys them.
And I love the like flavor text here where it's sort of like um it's getting I feel like it's getting kind of into because there's definitely like different types of ways that cults motivate people to stay with them and like work for them. And here the sort of like guilt tripping of like why you were born into this family and you must work for it and so that you deserve to stay in it is sort of like an interesting flip on it. Uh yeah, and so like from a flavor perspective as well, I like this. Okay. And I guess unless anyone else has stuff to say here, going once, going twice, going thrice, uh, my next card is going to be Induction Ceremony, from the mtg.design file. So, this is pretty simple. Uh, oh no, did they not put art credit on this? It looks like they didn't put art credit on this, so I'm not
There's
actually.
no art credit.
And the worst part is it's a canon art. People, okay, could uh, cre- credit your design or credit your artist, especially when they're canon. It makes it so much easier. I'm so excited about its design too. But okay, it's one black red for one black red. Induction Ceremony deals 2 damage to each untapped creature, and it has Conspire, and it's designed by UnbanTwin. Uh, so I really like this design because I like the idea of like making Conspire do something relevant to the card's effect. Because Conspire is, as you cast a spell, you may tap 2 untapped creatures you control that share a color with it when you do copy it. So here, not only do you get to copy it so that you get a bigger wipe, but you can also save 2 of your creatures from damage through that, making it sort of like an asymmetrical wipe in the process. And I think that's a really cool mechanical note to hit.
I really like that they use Conspire in a clever way, and I don't know that actually I didn't come across any other designs that use Conspire like this. Uh, I really am curious if Wizards will bring it back in a set because it's such a easy and um, yeah, it's just a very easy ability to do, and it just the whole idea of a cult of people, a group of people necessary in order to do this effect. I question whether uh 2 damage to each untapped creature. It might be a little bit more one-sided than it should be. And like spending 3 mana and tapping some creatures to potentially do a one-sided board wipe might be a little strong.
Yeah, and I think another thing that makes this annoying is that since your creatures, but sorry, I guess one thing that makes it a little bit more balanced is that your creatures are going to untap, and so if your opponent's like swinging out at you, or like being aggressive, it's really easy to like, despite this being a 3 mana wipe, for it to like miss a lot of their creatures just because it cares about untapped creatures. So I feel like to make this a true one-sided wipe, your opponent either has to be like really like dirtling, or they put in a bunch of creatures in a single turn, which are then immediately massacring.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's also hard to hold back creatures to attack into the open board. They're probably going to get another turn before they have to deal with your survivors. The 2 that you tap to Conspire are tapped, and anything you didn't tap gets hit.
So yeah, love the mini game here. Hate the lack of artist credit. And UnbanTwin, you've put artist credit before. You're better than this. But yeah, um, still overall a cool design. What is your next card gonna be, Ian?
Um, I have Initiative Darkness by Dragon of the West in mtg.design. Um, it was it's actually right next to it. Uh, it has a bit of text. It's a 2/1 uncommon human cleric for 1 and a black. Sacrifice 2 creatures named the Native Darkness. Create a 5/3 black horror creature token named Embodiment of Darkness. With sacrifice 2 creatures named Embodiment of Darkness. Return all creature cards from your graveyard to the battlefield. Um, uh, it's a little silly. I just like the way, cults are pyramid schemes, and I feel like this captured that. If you get a friend to, summon a demon with you, and then 2 more people get a friend to summon a demon with them. Well, those 2 demons, they can end the world together. Um, and then we'll all benefit. They're going to bring us all back. And I I just feel like that's a great pitch.
Describing it as a pyramid scheme is just fucking killing me. It's true, but it's just the funniest shit. Like, yeah, and so your employee benefits are that if you bring someone else on, you get to die. Isn't that great? And it's just like, hold
Yeah.
on, did I miss something here? I also like it's a lot of work, but if you get all 4 copies of this, um, you can just go ham because uh, at that point, presumably since you have all 4 initiative, unless you're like doing like regrowth effect style stuff to get back your initiative darkness, but if you just naturally have 4 copies of initiative darkness in your graveyard, then you can just infiniloop them to uh, sack and return them from your graveyard to the battlefield to give you infinite ETB and death triggers, which you can probably kill from there depending on what else you reanimated.
True, true.
Also,
And maybe it needs a safety valve there. But
I
uh
mean, getting 4 copies of a single card is, I think, fair game for winning the game. Also, like,
yeah, that's
yeah, also, like, I kind of wish that the horrors had, like, maybe, I kind of wish that maybe this was, like, a black 1/1 that upgraded into, like a 1 drop 1/1 that upgraded into, like, a 3/2 or something. Because I feel like with 5/3s, if you have 2 of them, you're more encouraged to just use them to kill your opponent in 2 swings. Is the way I'm feeling, rather than if you have 2 embodiment of
yeah.
darknesses, using them to reanimate everything. But that's like a minor thing.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's fair. That's fair though.
clone clone abilities would work really well here. So if you splashed into blue, you could clone the initiate. You could, or my one of my pet favorite cards, excuse me, is Spy Kit, which would also work well enough with this too. I think it's fine. I think it I almost might want to see it as a common so that there would be enough of them in a limited environment, but um I think most of the time it's going to be a tube one, but just it's having the sometimes just the threat of activation or just having something to try to work towards is a lot of fun. And I think this is a situation where it's exactly that. It's certainly not. It's probably harder to activate than um, Ecstatic Awakener, which is a pretty pushed card in Innistrad Midnight Hunt. But the cool thing is, right, you get the third step, which is kind of the ultimate, and so I don't know. I think it's a good design. I think it's a lot of fun, and yeah, just try to find more ways to have more initiates.
Yeah, I feel like I want to slap this at common in Moxtober Cube just as like a collect them all. That feels like a really fun thing to do. But yeah, okay, ancestral. What is your next card going to be?
All right, so in MSC, there is a card called Welcoming Adherent. And this is 1 green for human druid. Each other creature you control with a counter on it has hexproof from instance. You can pay 2 and a green, put a +1/+1 counter on another target creature you control. Activated only as a sorcery. It is a 2/3. And I really like this because, among all of these sort of brooding and dark cultists, sometimes you run into these cultists that actually are somewhat friendly, right? Maybe they're isolated or they're just, they're happy just kind of doing their own thing. And it's the sort of thing of, hey, if you join us, if you have the uh if you believe in what we believe in, we'll welcome you in. You're a part of us. And so I think this is kind of a fun design that gives you the ability you can welcome another person in by paying some mana and putting a counter on them. Pay
Ah,
your dues and you can join our cult.
see, I had this card on my list as well, but I had an opposite impression of the flavor, where it's like I think it's interesting because like green is like one of the communal colors along with white green like arguably the entire like Celestia faction is a cult if you like read the lore and stuff. But yeah, this definitely felt like because like the whole point is like from the outside cults seem like really crazy, but like the reason that people get like suckered into joining them is that they provide this feeling of like acceptance or like freedom from the cares of the world type thing. Like and the art and everything gives me like a real Midsommar vibe if you guys have like watched that movie. So like this kind of felt like that kind of like the outer face that cults like to present type of feel. Um, Mechanically, I love the idea of hexproof from instants because max hexproof can become annoying. Um, but hexproof from instants means that there's still a lot of counterplay with sorcery speed removal, wipes, creature based removal like chupacabras, etc., etc.
And I quite enjoy the thought that went into the activated ability can only you can only grant that hexproof using this card at sorcery speed. You can't. It shows a level of care.
Yeah, so shout out to MBTree for this design. Okay, my next card is going to take like another tack on classic or not on cult. Shoot, I gave it away. It's called classic in the MSC file. I misspoke and said the wrong word. Okay, but yeah, it's called classic by gynoidpoet. And don't be fooled by the frame. This isn't a saga. It's a song. Unlike sagas, which trigger each upkeep, um, this triggers whenever you cast a spell as it enters and whenever you cast a spell. It is essentially a permanent regrowth on the first three modes. On the last mode, you gain 6 life and add 4 mana in any combination of colors, which really helps out with casting some of those permanents, or with it just if you have other spells that you want to cast to trigger other songs, helps out with that as well. I think that this is a little bit too much recursion for its cost, especially since the recursion gives you spells that you can cast to keep it moving forward. However, I like the concept and play pattern of this as a whole, um, and it's just like another like fun, lighthearted take on the idea of what cult can be twisted into, or not twisted into, but like I guess like the various meanings of it. But yeah,
I agree with you pretty much in all those points because it you cast a spell and then you can just return. Well, hmm. I guess you'd want to cast spells that were permanents, and you could put in the graveyard some things that would sacrifice maybe. But regardless, right? You're getting stuff back. Just as you play a card, you get a card. So that seems pretty strong. Um, I don't know. I like that it takes 4 verses. Like it's you got to put a little bit of you have to wait a little bit to get the payoff. But in the 6th life might be I don't know. It seems quite strong. I think you're right. Maybe I would tweak a few numbers, but yeah.
Yeah, I think uh, it's a clever take. It's really clean. It has all those knobs for you to tweak. I mean, uh, the 3 verses. I when I first read it, I thought this isn't this can't be right. You're just gonna play, I don't know, a blood pet and just loop it, but it stops itself. Um, and it has 6 could become 4, 4 mana could be 3 mana or more mana. Just
essentially,
it's
there's a
nice.
lot of knobs, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
But yeah, shout out to Gynoid Poet for this design. Next up, Ian, what is your next card going to be?
Oh. Uh, my next design is Lightbearer Cultist by YellowPie in the mtg.design file. Um, as, as we mentioned on the last card I brought up, I wish you could get as many of these as you could, and several designs actually did have, a deck can have any number of cards with this name. Let me start with the card itself. Lightbearer Cultist is a 1/1 for black, human cleric. It gets +1/+1 for each card you own in exile with a light counter on it. For colorless, exile it from your graveyard with a light counter on it, and a deck can have any number of cards named Lightbearer Cultist. So there was I do actually wonder, there was a similar design with the same art also in MTG.design, and I did wonder if one of them inspired the other. But one thing about cults is their pervasiveness, not necessarily truth, but the idea that they could be all around you, this sort of conspiracy and secrecy. So, one way to show that is you can have any number of them. I think there's a limited space for interesting Relentless Rats designs. You can say on any card that you could put any number of them in there, but to make it be interesting, or play differently from some other card that you could have any number of, seems like a challenge to me. And I thought this was an interesting take on it. I did have some concerns that because they are all in exile with light counters on them, it's not as interactive as it could be. But I do think that it would play distinctively from a standard Relentless Rats. And I appreciated both the flavorful approach to the sort of paranoia of being in the cult and the secrecy around it, and also just an attack at this mechanical problem that I think it's promising. It's good.
Yeah, I love how it's like, again, one thing that I've talked about a lot is like making one drops in limited matter, and this does a great job of that, where it's like the first one, kind of underrated, but if you traded with an opponent's 2/1 and then exile it, all of a sudden all of your future ones are 2/2s for 1, which is like, oh, really good. And then 3/3s for 1, and it's like, hold on now. So yeah, I would happily draft like a draft deck with like 5 of these and then go to town. Um, but yeah, I would definitely want this to be the only card that had light counters. But yeah, overall, the collect 'em all vibe is great. I love that it makes a 1 drop matter in limited, and we love commons in this house. So shout out to YellowPie for this design.
Yeah, I share your sentiment here, and there's some clever things you could do. Like, because initially I was just like, oh, well, you'd exile it once you knew you had another cultist, but you could just do it whenever you have the mana, even if you don't have a cultist, just to prepare you for the future. And I think it makes your opponent decide if they want to block it or not, which is always, I think, really cool. You could also do some fun stuff, like if you had 2 of these on the board, and let's say none of them were exiled, that you could potentially chump one and sacrifice to pump the other. And I don't think it's that crazy of an effect. Like, I don't think it's too complex. If you had a sack outlet, so I think that kind of gives it a little bit of an extra wrinkle, which I adore.
Okay, Ancestral, what is your next card going to be?
All right. Let's talk about. Let's see. Let's do Deshra Enduring Occultist. This is on MTG.design. Black, green, blue. Legendary creature, zombie, wizard. Tap it, reveal the top card. If it's a land, put it on the battlefield. Otherwise, put it in your graveyard. Whenever you cast a spell from anywhere other than your hand, you can untap Deshra. And it is a 2/3. So it kind of reminds me a little bit of like Muldrotha. Maybe it's like a smaller Muldrotha. It kind of does everything that the multicolors usually want. It's sort of a mill without explicitly milling. And Meanwhile, it ramps you if you need land. So, well, or maybe it doesn't ramp, it accelerates. But
I
point
mean, well,
being,
it does ramp, and it also puts the lands in untapped, which like
oh, it does ramp. You're right.
yeah, like again, I think that this is pretty insane as like a Sultai Storm commander. You just put
Mm.
you fill your deck with a bunch of cards with cheap flashback or escape or whatever, and then you just go to town. If the top card is a land, cool, you've got more stuff. If it's not a land, you've got something you can grave cast, and then you can just like untap Deshra and go to town, which is like
Yeah.
which I think is kind of sick. I don't know like what y'all feel, but I feel like that's just kind of like a cool idea for a deck.
I love it. I I hadn't fully processed the interaction there, but I mean, I really like, if all your cards are grave castable, you can just keep searching.
I think I would have it under tapped to make it not go crazy, because otherwise I could totally see a situation where you
Well,
spend one
it
mana.
doesn't have haste is the thing, and it's not in the
It's a
colors that
land.
usually.
Well, right. I'm just
Are
saying
you,
if you
are
had
you saying
a
the land enters tapped? Sorry, I thought you were saying Deshra enters tapped. No,
oh
yeah.
the land enters tapped, yeah. Because otherwise you could just immediately spend that mana if with the right cards or combinations you could maybe find some
Mm.
way to untap Deshra. I guess the other thing too is it lets you put any land onto the battlefield, which that could maybe break some things. I don't know. I don't think this is the card you would put into a Tron deck, but but if there were sort of the Cabal coffers sort of cards that uh I don't know, it could maybe find some way to abuse it, but definitely kind of a cool thing going on there.
Yeah, so shout out to Tzarl for this design. Okay, and next up, it's my card is also going to be from NTG.design. It's going to be what are you? Something ritual. I just need to look at my list. Blood cult ritual. Zero originality points for the name, I'm afraid, but in terms of effect, I kind of love what this does. It's one mana, sorcery. As an additional cost to cast a spell, put a -1/-1 counter on a creature you control. Add black, black, black. If that mana is spent on a demon, avatar, or god creature spell, it gains haste until end of turn. So, firstly, I love the idea of ramp or like combo ramp that requires you to actually play cheap creatures to enable it, because it brings the power level down a lot by requiring you to actually like have additional resources in a different form, and so therefore you need like more cards to actually go off or whatever. This being a sorcery also means that you can't like cast a bunch in response to each other or like cast it on an opponent's turn. That's another like little like cast it in response to removal or something, and then ramp out something with flash. There's like a level of like control there. And yeah, like it reminds me a lot of like I don't Lorwyn, Eventide, Shadowmoor. I mix them all up, but there's a card, a hybrid blue black where it's one blue black as an additional cost, put a -1/-1 counter on a creature you control, draw two cards. It reminds me of like that kind of stuff where I love that kind of costing, where it's like it's in between sacking a creature and like yeah, it's like a reduced rate sacking a creature where if you want to play it cheap and early, or if you're curving into it, it's probably just going to be sacrifice a creature, but you can play it later in the game as just sort of like a debuff and not actually lose out on board. Um, and yeah, I think the demon avatar god gaining haste. We talked earlier about how like that's kind of the iconic types for cults, and so it feels uh, pretty cool and flavorful. And also like usually if you're using like your fast mana on like a creature, um, maybe less so for gods, but usually for like demons or avatars or whatever, that I like the incentive to use fast mana on creatures, because it means that even though you're getting out a big beater early, they're probably answerable by removal, and therefore your opponent can still like get back on tempo rather than just like being comboed out and losing the game. So yeah, lots of like little knobs here that I like, both flavorfully and mechanically.
Yeah, the flavor is really good. Like it's this we had the ritual theme a few days ago, and uh, if this wasn't in that day, this could have certainly been. The cults and rituals sort of go hand in hand, and the whole idea is that it's a way of sacrificing in the literal sense, I guess. The the definition in the dictionary sense. You're not actually you're not actually sacrificing a creature, but you're making a creature weaker, and it's an interesting take on the just the dark ritual, the infamous dark ritual spell, and I think that the minor upside counteracting with the slightly slightly worse drawback with the -1/-1 counter. I think that more than balances things out.
Yeah, I really like this design. Um, it is also a sorcery, which is a little bit nice over Dark Ritual. I don't know how much that came up, but it's it feels a little more. Again, it's pushing you to play answerable things, and it's but it's not barring you from trying to storm with it. I like it.
Okay, and I guess speaking of things you like, what is your next card going to be?
Oh, is it me? Um, it is Temple of the Snake Cult by
Mm-hmm.
COAnon. I think it's in both of them. Uh,
Yeah,
so
it
it
is in
is, yeah.
both.
Um, Temple of the Snake Cult is a 2-mana artifact. It is a tribal artifact with the subtype Snake. Tap, mill 2 cards. If at least one snake card is milled this way, each opponent loses 1 life. And 2 mana and tap, exile Temple of the Snake Cult. You gain 1 life for each snake card in your graveyard, then shuffle your graveyard into your library. Um, it's a bit niche. Some kind of snake milling strategy. I feel like this would need a lot of support around it. Um, I I don't mind that it's niche. I think I always enjoy when a card tells me what else I should expect to see. If I see this in a draft, I should hope to see more snakes and more milling. I also just like just creating a cult in whole instead of just the ideas of cults. This is what cults are. We have a solid cult here. It is the Snake Cult. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and and I like that it plays on the ideas of snakes and immortality. Snakes shed their skins, and historically, lots of cultures have seen this uh, as a sign of rejuvenation. So you can shuffle them back into your library, but it also bites. Snakes are poisonous. It just it's I, I the card. I don't think the card is gonna uh it's not gonna blow anyone away. It's no one's gonna be like, oh, that's brilliant, but it seems really interesting. Um, I want to know more about it, and I think that's a great quality.
Yeah, I like how this plays well in multiples because of it being a tribal artifact. That's I usually think tribal is sometimes overused, but for this type of thing where it's an undersupported tribe anyways, I think that makes a lot of sense for draft. I do think it's a little weak though. I kind of think that like I could see the exile ability instead of just gaining you life, like draining you life from the opponent. Like each opponent loses 1 life for each snake card in your graveyard. You gain life equal to the life lost this way. Um, then shuffle your graveyard into your library, something like that.
I think the second ability is probably the more relevant one. As much as I'm envisioning, the constructed deck with all the snakes and you just keep milling and you're having fun, I think the second ability is probably the more useful one, because that could work even in, I mean, paying 2 and exiling the card is not a bad card just to get your stuff from your graveyard back, especially in colored decks that don't normally have that ability, right? So if you had a,
Yeah,
I don't know,
it's
a
very
white
Elixir
deck
of Immortality-ish for like control.
right, right. Um, but yeah, what else was I gonna say here? Um, yeah, I'm trying to think of like important snakes that I would run into, and the only I know we've had a couple of like commander cards that have been snakes, but and a lot of times I think we have like Farika and Hapatra, but they just create snake tokens, so
I
or
think like
insect
for Snake
tokens.
Tribal, like one thing that's been there a lot is like Ophidian style effects, where it's just like I poke you, I draw a card. So something, and or like there's like Lore Scale Coatl, which grows whenever you draw a card. So I
Hmm.
wish there was like I feel like that's like a big part of Snake Tribal identity that I wish was maybe represented here.
Hmm. But yeah, I think maybe the card actually works better. I hate to say it, but it might actually work better in non-snake decks. At least for the second ability for sure, like we talked about, and then for the first ability, so there's plenty of decks that just want to mill stuff, like just want to flood your graveyard, like the Sultai commander we were talking about earlier, the Deshra. Um, yeah.
Okay, Ancestral. What is your next card going to be?
Well, let's talk about Yelassa Rakdos Bloodletter. This is an MTG.design. 1 black red, legendary creature human rogue, 1/3. Whenever an opponent loses life for the second time each turn, draw a card. Whenever a creature is dealt damage for the second time each turn, gain control of it until the end of your next turn. And this is an uncommon. I I find this rather enticing. So we've had plenty of spectacle kind of cards, and the fact that this is Rakdos, and we have some art from what looks to be like someone in the Rakdos cult. It's interesting that it's loses life for the second time each turn. So I guess I can envision, okay, you attack your opponent, maybe you can get in. That's one time. Then you got to find some other way to get more damage in. Perhaps it's just through some sort of life loss mechanic, but uh, so not terribly, uh, um, not extremely difficult to do, but not certainly as easy as just the straight up curiosity effect that we have in green and blue, and that seems to make a little bit more sense here. Black and red doesn't get it has to be a little bit harder to get. There has to be some sort of hoops you got to go through or drawbacks you have to get to for black or red. Um, Perhaps the first ability skews more black, and the second ability, gaining control of it until the end of your next turn, that feels a bit more red. That part seems a bit more difficult. Having to deal damage to a creature the second time and not kill it. um, and probably where that is going to happen is on the really beefy creatures that you would actually want to steal. So yeah, I find it a very enticing card to build around.
Yeah, this is pretty sick. It basically just tells you like, hey, play a bunch of cheap pinger effects and go to town. Um, yeah, I don't know. I don't have much to say about this. It feels very Rakdos. It has lots of cool rewards, um, and it encourages you to like spread the love around. Where it's like, well, instead of just like, because it's not like you can't. It's not like whenever you like what I was basically saying is that like it encourages you both to hit players and their creatures. I do wish that it was a true act of treason where it untapped it and you gained haste, so that the idea wasn't just like you gain control of it and then sack it, because at that point it's like, okay, why am I not just playing bigger burn? But
Hmm.
yeah, um, overall big fan of this card. So shout out to Utaresamael for this design.
I want to play
Yeah.
this with. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, I think I actually was really appreciating gain control of it until the end of your next turn, uh, because it makes combat much more difficult for the defending player.
Oh, end of your
Um,
next turn.
Mhm.
Oh, I did not. I
so
thought it was
you can
end of.
attack with it. So your first wave of you attack, combat damage happens. Maybe there's something with 2 toughness left, and you can ping it. You gain control of it, then you can attack with it next turn. So it's almost giving you that active treason without having to give you a second combat step.
Yeah, no. Okay, I totally missed that it's until the end of your next turn. I thought it was end of this turn. So yeah, okay. Retract my
And I do
suggestion
think that
there.
also makes blocking much more frightening.
I think I would change the second ability to be a creature you don't control or an opponent controls for two reasons. One is I think it's a little bit. It would seem kind of weird to have to keep track of a trigger for just like the I don't know, just like a standard old 2/3 that you had on the board. Like, oh, I gain control of the creature I already have. Okay, but I think more importantly is if you steal the creature and then let's say you attack the next turn, that you could just basically keep the creature over
Mm.
and over, which maybe could get a little like if it was a I don't know a death toucher or something. I don't know. It could maybe get a little out of hand. But what I really want to do is I want to play this with Judith, the Scourge Diva, because when a non-token creature you control dies, she gets to deal damage to any target. So you could sacrifice something, or if your opponent blocks the creature, like some very nice effects that you can control there.
Yeah, definitely stacks well with other Rakdos cards and commanders.
And the 3 toughness I think is somewhat relevant here. So Yelassa could be a serviceable blocker because nothing says that this can't trigger on an opponent's turn.
That's
Mm.
true. Mm-hmm. It's also a good way to like attack, and if they decide to just like chump it or like
Mm-hmm.
block, like it's a good way of like dealing them one damage and then potentially dealing another damage with some other source that you have. So yeah, good on both counts. Okay, and now we're getting about into the time where it's our final round. Um, and let's talk about our own designs for this round. So my last card is actually it's not a card in the file, but I'll describe it. It's an old card that I designed that I think fits for today. It's Runo Stromkirk, which feels particularly appropriate considering that the sets that we're in right now are Innistrad themed. But Runo was a character that captivated me from Innistrad flavor texts, but I was surprised that he didn't get like a more formal presence um, in our return to Innistrad at all. So I wanted to whip up a card for him. So it's blue, black, red for a legendary creature vampire noble, 3/3. Each horror, kraken, leviathan, octopus, and serpent creature card you own that isn't on the battlefield has emerge. The emerge cost is equal to its mana cost. Whenever you cast a creature spell for its emerge cost, return target permanent to its owner's hand, then that player discards a card. So the idea is Runo in lore is like a sea cultist. So I was like, yeah, we'll play with the Innistrad mechanic. Uh, we'll give these big and like it's like killing two birds with one stone because I love like the big creature tribal or like big sea creature tribal batching, but it feels like there hasn't been like a good time to like really let it shine. Um, and so I love the idea of like giving them a way to cheapen their cost and also like rewarding you for casting them for emerge by like getting allowing you to recoil or like Dinrova horror or like on cast with that. So yeah, and I think that it kind of like it's a very powerful effect, but one that is balanced by like how generally weak and unsupported these tribes are. So yeah, and I like it both flavorfully and mechanically. Hello? Hello.
We're here.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. We were wondering if you could paste it in the chat.
Oh, okay. Yeah, give me a second with that. Okay, sorry for the sudden silence there, folks. That was my fault for springing this card on my co-hosts and not actually throwing it in the file earlier. They now have it.
Remind me what? Boy, it's I'm so bad with some of these keywords. Emerge is where you pay the difference.
Yeah, you sack a creature and you pay the difference in mana value.
I think Emerge only reduces colorless,
Yeah, it's not
but I
like
may
a
be
convoke
mistaken.
as far as I know. So yeah, basically it was big in Return to Innistrad as or like Innistrad, yeah, Return to Innistrad, where it was like um, flavored as Eldrazi's uh, chomping on little cultists to come out a little bit earlier. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, Eldrazi's are cool and all, but can we have cults around? Like we've had traditional sea cults on Innistrad for ages now.
Hmm. I Part of me would want to see this in like as like a pirate cult, like seafaring pirates, and maybe they sort of develop some sort of myths or something about serpents and that it's easy to be scared by them, but maybe they could be revered. Um, I guess I don't know enough about the vampires on Innistrad, but maybe this fits totally in line with the Stromkirk. Uh, I think the only thing I might consider would be the target permanent, maybe return target non-land permanent. Otherwise, potentially you could really screw your opponents with land removal, and if they don't have large hands, then they might be forced to discard the land, which is basically destroying a land.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I do really appreciate um, cults that aren't worshipping real things. Like, I mean,
Hmm.
real in the sense of like, we don't have to summon it from somewhere else. We just have to get it to get closer. And I think that's entertaining for Emerge. I mean,
I actually think it's kind of refreshing having it not be a specific creature type or a specific card, like go get a demon or what have you. That it's sort of uh you're, I don't know, worshiping the strange, the Cthulhu sort of, creatures. It's not a specific we worship only the octopuses. It's we're it's a little bit more expansive than that. And I don't know, it seems to give it more like this would be like what the a sect of the water worshippers or something like that.
But yeah, okay. So, Ian, what cards did you design for today's prompt?
so I went with Offering instead of Emerge, which predates it and is weirder. I think a place to start here would be Occultivate in the MSE file because I did it for the pun. Um, Occultivate is a sorcery for 2 black and a green. It has Cleric Offering. You may cast this card anytime you could cast an instant by sacrificing a cleric and paying the difference in mana costs between this and the sacrificed cleric. Mana cost includes color. You draw 2 cards and you lose 2 life. Put up to 1 land card from your hand onto the battlefield tapped. The effect itself, um, was created to fit the name, which, as I already admitted, was just a lame pun. But Cleric Offering is something that I hit on for an earlier project I did called 54 Halves. I was searching for mechanics to fit a different reason. Offering comes from Kamigawa, um, and I think has been underserved by giving it, you have Snake Offering in Kamigawa and Patron of the Orochi. Um, I like the way that it plays. You can play it because by sacrificing it, you can get it instant speed. Um, I decided to play around with a little more. So I started with Occultivate. Um, and then I had Penitent of the Candle and Preacher of the Candle. Neither of these cards has Cleric Offering. They are clerics. And they both have alternate casting costs. Because what you really want to do with Cleric Offering is get out a smushy, a small squishy cleric with a great big casting cost that you cheated out in advance. And I had a bunch of candle art stockpiled from Wax, so they're both the cult is now candle themed. Um, and then finally, because those were in black and white, I have Resurrection Rites is another Cleric Offering card in black and white that might more reasonably fit in that proposed archetype. It is a sorcery for 3 white and a black. It has Cleric Offering, and you may return target creature card with power 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. I did mean to soup that up at some point, but I think it's serviceable.
Yeah, Offering is a fun mechanic that I didn't know existed. I don't know how old it is. I kind of want to make stuff with it now. It seems pretty cool. I also really love which one was it? Penitent of the Candle. Just because I'm like, yes, let me drop this in Moxtober Cube. It's absolutely filthy, but I love it. And just, yeah, the general theme of like, I like Turbo Cult, where the idea is like everything has like expensive main costs, but you have like these powerful alt costs that you can like really dip into. Like yeah, I think this would be really cool as like alt cost tribal and like mix that in with cleric tribal and then go ham, because all of the cards I think have alt costs, right? So far.
Uh, both of the clerics do, yeah.
And does cleric offering count as an alt cost?
Oh, that
Yeah.
is also, yeah,
Yeah. Okay, so we zip in
that's
and
true.
zoom in. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, this reminds me of Growth Spiral, which that was a bit pushed back when it was in standard, and this costs 2 more, which is fine because you're getting a second card anyway. And of course, center's tapped, but I think it works well. It's kind of funny. I didn't necessarily. I guess when I saw it and I was thinking Cleric Offering, I'm like, but why is that green? And then okay, put the land on the battlefield. So I think it works out fine. And for 4 mana, I think it could potentially be a common, but I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe it depends on the environment. Getting that ramp down might be a little strong if it were a common. So I like the idea here definitely, and I agree with you. I think there's a lot of design space for offering.
Oh, yeah, also, a cultivate was on my list because like 90% of the name because of the name. That's a fucking fantastic name.
And hey, Wizards does that sometimes, whether it be champion of the perished, right?
Mm.
Even black bordered sets, they'll pull those puns out.
Okay. And ancestral, did you design a card for today?
I did not design a card for the day.
Totally cool.
And I'm there's not a card I'm burning to talk about, so I'm happy to end it on Ian's cards here.
For sure. And yeah, with that, thanks everyone for watching. We're also, I forgot to mention this earlier, but we're in the home stretch, last week of Moxtober. Feels kind of crazy. I had some projects lined up for Moxtober, like Moxtober Cube and another set I'm working on. I don't think I'll finish them within Moxtober itself, but hopefully first half of November can get them done. But yeah, I'm really excited. If any of you, though, have finished projects you'd like to talk about, or like that you're planning to finish during Moxtober and would like to talk about as a whole, once Moxtober is over, I do want to do like a few days to talk about like to have some people on and talk about projects they've worked on during Moxtober, because we've seen some cards from projects here and there like Juliet's Jumpstart Remix, mono white borders like Skeleton a Day, stuff like that, but we haven't seen them together as a whole. So if you're one of those people that I mentioned or have a project of your own, reach out to me and we can figure something out. But yeah, that's my original part of the ending spiel. The rest is going to be the same. If you want to see designer cards for any and all the designs we talked about today, you can find that in the description, as well as full files that these individual designs were pulled from, and instructions on how you can get your own cards submitted to those files and potentially chosen for future recaps. Thanks to Ian for coming on as a new guest. Thanks to Ancestral for coming on as an existing guest. Thanks to Ancestral and Cajun for setting up the file submissions so that we can do these videos at all. But other than that, this has been day 26 of Moxtober Cult, and I'll see you all tomorrow for day 27 Parasite. Until then, see ya!